And want to go to the beginning of the book of Ephesians, we'll start there. I'm not going to use any slides, fellas, until Bible class, so you can turn that off. Folks will be going, why isn't he using his stuff? So that's cool. Thank you guys for letting me be the speaker and the teacher during your lectureship or your fall meeting. I get to go to lots of places. The congregation I work with allows me a lot of freedom to travel, and folks are very kind to invite me. From my standpoint, a congregation says, hey, we're going to dedicate 2 or 3 days. We're going to invite guests into our house. We're going to have a special event. For them to invite you and say, hey, we want you to speak to our guests while they're here. That's a very honoring thing. It's a very humbling thing. And I thank you for trusting me and studying with me and letting me be a guest while you have guests. And that just means a lot to me, and I'm honored by that. Thank you so much for that invitation, for not only your friendship, your encouragement, but also your hospitality. When you get to the book of Ephesians, and I like to study globally, I like to get kind of a big handle on things and then kind of deep dive into it. But if you look at the book of Ephesians, Paul starts out in chapter 1, and if you were to just kind of peruse through chapter 1, you're going to get words like plan, purpose, according to his will, according to the purpose that he purposed in himself, according to the pleasure of his will. You're even going to get a word predestination. But what you do when you look at Ephesians chapter 1, Paul is laying out that I've got some understanding into this mystery, this plan, this intention that God had for humanity. We're going to find out as you read that this was God's eternal purpose. That before God created the first Adam, A-D-A-M or A-T-O-M, before he did anything, he had planned to do something with his creation. He's planned to do something with humanity. As you read this text, God's purpose, God's will, God's pleasure, according to the pleasure that he purposed in himself, and even the term predestination. Now, when you read predestination in the New Testament, in your mind, when you read predestination, you should hear the word predetermined. Predestination almost takes away free will. What God predetermined was, if this, then this. God predestined, God predetermined, I'm going to send my son. He's going to die on the cross. He's going to be resurrected from the dead. Anybody who believes in him and responds to that will then be adopted as my children. I predetermined that sequence. He doesn't say, I chose you, I didn't choose you. Our salvation is not predestined, but it's predetermined as participants in this mystery. So Paul says, hey, God's got this plan. God's got this purpose. God's doing this intentional thing. Last 2 verses in what we call in the English Bible, chapter 1, says this. And he put all things under his feet and gave him to be head over all things to the church, which is his body, the fullness of him who filleth all in all. New International Version says, who fills everything in every way. This thing that God was doing, this intention that God planned before the creation of the material world, this eternal purpose of God has its fulfillment. It is filled full. It reaches its capacity. It does what it's supposed to do in this thing that we call the church. And as participants in the church, we're participating in God's eternal purpose. Now, what was that purpose? Well, if you remember what Cecil read for us, God's going to take 2 people, Jews and non-Jews, you're going to make them one. You're going to take those 2 groups that are reconciled, and he's going to reconcile them to himself through the blood of the cross. If you want a simple explanation for what the cross of Christ means, it's the plus sign of the universe. It's God and people, people and people. And so when we spend a weekend talking about family, or we spend a weekend talking about relationships, relationships and family are almost the core message of the Bible, and it's almost the core message of Christianity. Because God said, my intention is to have unity between people, and then take the sins of those people, wipe them out, and reconcile them, bring them back into friendship, bring them back into relationship with me. And as you explore, you do a deep dive in Ephesians, it's not that the Gentiles got to be part of Christianity after Judaism failed, after Judaism rejected the Messiah. It's always been the plan. God's plan always was, I'm going to bring the Gentiles on board and I'm going to reconcile the whole world. The promise to Abraham was every nation in the world will be blessed by one of your descendants. And that descendant was the Messiah. So Paul is explaining to this group of Christians in the city of Ephesus that this is what God intended, what God wanted to do. And that passage that Cecil read, God's going to bring people and God and people together. And he calls that the mystery. Because he said the old prophets didn't understand it. The angels wanted to look into it. The people in the old days didn't fully understand that what's going to happen. The Jewish nation was the vehicle to bring the Messiah, and the Messiah is the fulfillment of God's plan to bring all these people together. Now, if you outlined the book of Ephesians and you just went through it kind of perusing and you looked at every section that said this is what you were, this is what you are. This is what you used to be. This is what you should be. You can do a full study of Ephesians just based on the before versus after. But you can also do a look at Ephesians. This is what we'll do this morning by looking at 5 passages that start with the idea of walk. Now, if you've got a modern speech translation, an NLT, an NIV, a New Century Version, you'll get the word live. And that's what the idea of walk is. But the actual Greek word is peripedeo. It means as you walk about. But it has the connotation of lifestyle. One of my favorite T-shirts that got ruined in a football game had these footprints on it. It said, you can walk the walk, but can you talk the talk? Or you can talk the talk, but can you walk the walk? And the walking is lifestyle. So Paul's going to do these sections of if you're a part of the new humanity, the new man, the uniting of people together and then people in God, there's some ways we should behave. And so we'll just kind of, as best as we can, cover this in the time that's allotted. Ephesians chapter 4, and we talked about this some last night. But Paul says, as the prisoner of the Lord, I beg you, I beseech you that you walk worthy. Now, when he talks about walking worthy, he's going to talk about lowliness and meekness and long-suffering and bearing. And last night we said that idea is that in order to be worthy of this title Christianity, in order to be worthy of being part of the new humanity, in order to be consistent with what we are called, in order to be consistent with what we're called to be, we need to be able to deal with imperfect people. Because all those words intimate that I don't, I'm not too important to be offended. Lowliness. When you do offend me, I treat you with gentleness. When you're a repeat offender, I treat you with long suffering. And I get the idea that sometimes you're a work in progress and I bear with you. But then the crux of the matter is the next verse where he says, you endeavor to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. In order to be worthy of the calling that we've been called to, what we pursue is unity. Unity is the thing that marks us differently than everybody else on the planet. Jesus tells his apostles the night after he washes their feet, he says, by this shall all men know you're my disciples, if you love one another. If we are fragmented, if we are splintered, if we are factious, if we are argumentative, and we can't get along with us, how are we supposed to teach anybody that God loves them and they're supposed to love God and that we love each other? So Paul says if you want to be worthy of this title, you've got to walk in unity. And basically he sets out that there's 7 things that define our unity. There's one body, one spirit, one hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and one God. He said, if you've got unity on those things, you've got to start toward living toward what this unity is. Then the second thing he's going to do is if we're going to walk worthy, verse 17, this I say therefore and testify in the Lord that you no longer walk as the rest of the Gentiles walk, in the futility of their mind, having their understanding darkened, being alienated from life of God because of the ignorance that is in them and because of the blindness of their hearts. He says, listen, when you become a Christian, not only do you walk worthy, but you got to walk different. Your before and after picture have to look very, very distinct. You can't walk like you used to walk. You've got to leave that culture. You've got to leave those values. You've got to leave those things that were important to you. And if you claim to be part of the new humanity, not only do you walk worthy, but you walk different. the way you used to live before you were a Christian and the way you live after a Christian has to look really, really starkly different. And I'm afraid sometimes we don't get the idea that renewal in Christ is something. And this is hard. I change my perspective when I become a Christian. And some of the things that I valued and some of the things I thought and some of the things I believed and some of the things I held as important, those things don't hold that same status. Have you really been transformed? Does your before and after picture look different? Do you really believe that Jesus died for the people out there the same as He died for you? You watch a guy on the news who's a violent offender, who's acting like a bad actor. You've got to ask yourself, do I really believe that Jesus died for him the same as He died for me? If you believe that, it'll change the way you think, evaluate, judge, and react to flawed people. Being different means different. I want you to walk worthy. I want you to walk different. Then he says, verse 1 of chapter 5, therefore be imitators of God as dear children and walk in love, as Christ also has loved us and given Himself for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God, a sweet-smelling aroma. And then he says, in fornication and uncleanness and covetous, let it not be named among you as fitting for the saints, and no filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor coarse jesting, which is not fitting, but rather the giving of thanks. For this you know that no sexually immoral, that's what the word fornicator means, no sexually immoral person, unclean person, covetous person, a person who's an idolater, has any place in the inheritance of Christ and God. He says, not only do you walk worthy, and not only do you walk different, but I want you to walk in love. And it's interesting that some of the strictest teachings about sexual morality come in a section where Paul talks about love. See, the idea behind our getting along with each other, if we love each other, it creates a behavior code. See, when I say that I love you as my neighbor, as my friend, as my spouse, I won't sin with you, and I won't sin against you. When you look at God's holiness code, the way that people are supposed to behave, everything God has ever said to do is good for relationships. And everything God's ever said not to do is bad for relationships. And rather than thinking that God has these arbitrary rules where He restricts human behavior or the expressions of human sexuality, God says if you act this way, it has a negative impact either on you, it has a negative impact on me, or it has a negative impact on us. And when we think about walking in love, it's not just the emotion of love, but it's the intention that I'm going to do what's in your best interest, and I'm not going to sin with you, and then I'm not going to sin against you. And then he says, not only do I want you to walk different, walk worthy, and walk in love, but I want you to walk in light. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 8. For you were once in darkness, and now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of the Spirit is all goodness, righteousness, and truth. Paul says if you're going to walk, if you're going to be part of this new humanity, if you're going to be part of this thing that God has called you to, you got to walk in light. And then he says if you walk in light, you have these spiritual attributes. Now, we're used to the long list. The fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Galatians 5:22. He said, but the fruit of the Spirit can be summed up with these three terms: goodness, righteousness, and truth. Sometimes, just for your edification, go home and take 3 pieces of paper, write good, right, and true. And then take love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, and see where those fit in those 3 different categories. Because you can take the fruits of the Spirit, the manifestations of the Spirit, those attributes, and basically you can divide them into either it's good, it's right, or it's true. Now, when you decide to treat somebody a certain way, you react to somebody who's sinned against you. Is this good, right, and true? I'm going to post something on Facebook. Is it good, right, and true? I'm going to share something somebody said. Is it good, right, and true? I'm going to read this. Is it good, right, and true? I'm going to watch this on my iPhone. Is it good, right, and true? If you simply have those three gatekeepers for the things that we saw, read, watched, said, and did, and participated in as children of light, we do what is good, we do what is right, and we do what is true. The manifestation of Christianity is basically in principles, not in techniques. My friend, Tyler, who was with me last night, he's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He teaches 3 days a week at a gym. And you say, hey, Tyler, what's the fundamentals of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Now, you might think arm bars and arm triangles and wrist locks. No. The principles, the fundamentals of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu are balance, leverage, and weight distribution. An arm bar is a manifestation of balance and leverage. A triangle choke is a manifestation of weight distribution and leverage. Christianity is not rules, but it's a manifestation of good, right, and true. And it's not that there's this set of things we have to do. It's these characteristics that we become, and because we are trying to be good, right, and true, it manifests itself in the way I treat my neighbor, the way I treat my boss, whatever. So he says, I want you to be worthy. I want you to walk different. I want you to walk in love, and I want you to walk in light. And then the last thing that he's going to say, he says, and I want you to walk in wisdom. Verse 15, see then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil. Now, after lunch, I want to go back to that verse and talk about the way we manage time and how sometimes time management affects us, and tie that into a thing about emotional intelligence and look at our health as people in the way we manage the resource of time. But we'll do that. We'll do a deep dive into that, Lord willing, after lunch. Therefore, do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is. He said, if you want to be a person who's wise, if you want to walk in wisdom, number one, it involves the way you manage your time. And the thing that manages your management of time is, what's the will of the Lord? When you get up in the morning, you're not looking for, how do I please my wife? How do I please myself? How do I please my boss? It's how do I please the Lord? Now, as you read this book, you're going to realize that pleasing the Lord really, really does involve how I treat people. Jesus, take the 639 commandments in the Old Testament and tell us what the most important one is. What will Jesus say? Love the Lord your God with your heart, soul, strength, and mind. Love your neighbors yourself. God and people, people and people. You look at the 10 commandments. The first 5 are God and people. The second 5 are people and people. Look at the Beatitudes. The first 4 are God and people. The second 4 are people and people. He says, if you want to be wisdom, if you want to be a person who walks wisely, you figure out what the will of the Lord is as it relates to certain things. Now, he's going to expound on that. Don't be unwise, but be wise. Redeem the time. Figure out what the will of the Lord is. And do not be drunk with wine, which leads to dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit. Speaking to yourselves in psalms and in hymns and in spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your hearts to the Lord, giving thanks always for all things to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. He goes, if you want to be wise, you want to walk as a wise person, then you fill yourself up. Number one, what's the will of the Lord? And number two, you fill your life up. And it's almost a play on words. Don't be filled with spirits. That leads to dissipation, leads to debauchery, leads to all kind of bad behavior, but be filled with the Spirit. You see, people who are filled with spirits, alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. When you drink it, you should take a nap. But if you drink it and it makes you think you can dance or fight, you're allergic to it. You're having an allergic reaction, and it raises your confidence while lowering your actual ability. We call that liquid courage, okay? He says, don't be filled with spirits. It leads to debauchery, leads to dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit. People who are Spirit-filled manifest that in overflowing what? Praise, thanksgiving, thankfulness, psalms, hymns, spiritual songs, and being always thankful. He said, if you want to be a wise person, look at how your life overflows, and what overflows in your life means what your life is full of. Is it full of spirits, or is it full of the Spirit? And then he says, submitting, this is verse 21, submitting to one another in the fear of God. He says, if you're going to be a wise person, if you're going to fulfill this agenda that God has for people, you're going to walk worthy, you're going to walk different, you're going to walk in love, you're going to walk in light, you're going to walk wisely, and part of that wisdom is I'm going to let the way I treat you, I'm going to submit to you, be affected by my reverence for God. My dynamic with other people has nothing to do with other people. Has everything to do with God. I treat you the way I treat you because my connection to God affects that. That's a change. See, your behavior, your ethics, your treatment, your rudeness, your honesty, all those things really should have no bearing on me. I treat you the way I treat you based on the way I'm connected to God. Number one, based on God's treatment for me. And when I recognize how God treated me, I pass that on and I treat other people that way. In a marriage, they used to explain it like a triangle. You've got God at the top, the husband here, the wife here, and the closer you get to God, the closer you get to each other. You can't do this, hey, we're close to each other and far away from God. That doesn't work. But as we get close to God, it affects our relationship with other people. He says, you submit to one another because of or out of your reverence for Christ. That means your behavior has nothing to do with it. I'm impervious or immune to your behavior because my relationship with God affects how I respond to you. And then he says, you submit to one another out of your reverence for Christ. And then look at the next verses. Husbands and wives, wives and husbands, parents and children, children and parents, slaves and masters, masters and slaves. If you could find an ancient Roman document written around 70 AD or in the mid-60s, you would find what they call a domestic code. And that domestic code would be, if you're a free Roman citizen and you manage your house, this is how you treat your wife and how your kids have to behave and how you manage your slaves. Christianity just turned it upside down. He said, as a free person in Christ, as a citizen of the kingdom, not a citizen of Rome, as a citizen of the kingdom, husbands and wives, wives and husbands, parents and children, children and parents, slaves and masters, masters and slaves. He says, you treat people the way you treat people, and it's not because of the people, but because of your connection with Christ. When he talks about the wives, he said, wives, you submit to your husbands as you would to the Lord. And he tells the husbands, you love your wives as Christ loved the church. And love is sacrificial, love is giving. It's not giving in, it's not giving up, it's not giving out, it's just giving. If you really understand this passage, Jesus was submissive to the needs of the church. And when Jesus was submissive to the needs of the church was submissive to Christ because Jesus' behavior was not selfish. And we started out on Friday night talking a lot about selfishness. Selfishness is the foundation for trust. If I want to be a person of trust, I have to behave selflessly. And if you're a person who behaves selfishly, I don't trust you. Fellas, if you're having submission problems at home, it's either because your wife is being selfish or she thinks you are. And there's no other way around that. When people trust you because they don't think you're selfish, they follow your leadership, they follow your influence, and they're submissive. And if they don't respond to that, it's either because you're not being selfish or because they are. And the best illustration for this is actually when he talks about slavery. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 5. Servants, be obedient to those who are your masters according to the flesh, without fear or trembling, but in sincerity of heart as to Christ. How do I treat my boss? How do I treat my teacher? How do I treat the governing authorities? Has nothing to do with them and everything to do with Christ. How do I respond to Christ? Not with eye service as men pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, with goodwill doing service as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that whatever good anyone does, he will receive the same from the Lord, whether he's slave or free. He says, when you go to work, and Paul says, look, I'm not talking about whether I endorse, I'm not an advocate nor an opponent of slavery. He said, we live in a society that has slaves. And if you find yourself in an unfair position, how do Christians behave when things are unfair? Well, I'm going to treat this guy that owns me like he's my master. Not my earthly master, but my heavenly master. Now, what would happen if we just did that at work? I'm going to view my supervisor as the Lord. I'm going to view my teacher at school as the Lord. I'm going to view my coach or police officer or governor or a mayor, and I'm going to give them their due reverence because I'm submissive to God. I'm also submissive to the people that are in authority. That would solve a lot of the competition we have on the planet. And he says, this is not about acting good while this guy's looking at you, not eye service. This is doing goodwill from the heart as if you're doing it to God. And so he says, if you're going to be part of this new humanity, if you're going to participate in this thing that brings God and people together and people together, this is how the people act. You walk worthy, you walk different, you walk in love, you walk in light, and you walk in wisdom. And the idea that I'm participating in the plan of God affects all my interactions. And then he changes. He's done walk, 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 walk. And then he wraps up this letter with a real interesting text. And he's going to talk about standing. And this is about, it's almost like the concept of be still and know that I am God. Be still doesn't mean sit and chill and meditate. It means to be steady, to be firm, to have a centeredness. That's what he's going to talk about when he goes from walking to standing. And please pay attention to this. Verse 10, finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord, in the power of his might, and put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the devil. Verse 13, take the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand. And having done all to stand, stand with your waist girt with truth, the breastplate of righteousness, your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace, the helmet of salvation, the shield of faith, that you may extinguish the fiery darts of the wicked one. We get into this text, and I'm a dude, and I like stuff like that. You know, when I drew, I like to draw knights and soldiers and armor. I got body armor in my car. I got a $1,000 Ninja Turtle vest. It doesn't have any it doesn't have any bullets in it, but I got a Class 2 plate carrier. I've got a Kevlar skateboard helmet. I've got a fireproof mask. I wear it when I go play with SWAT. Hey Lonnie, we're going to go kick in a door. We're going to go. You want to go with us? I get on the big black truck and I'm in my little ninja suit, you know, riding on the bumper with no bullets. I like that stuff. It's cool. But we read these verses and we think about warfare. You know, we think about helmets and breastplates and swords and boots, and we think about battle. A Roman soldier at this time was more of a policeman than he was a soldier. They weren't at war, they'd conquered the place. These guys were patrolling and keeping peace. They were just taking care of business. I don't want you to think about this armor of God as a battle suit, but as a survival suit. Years ago, Jackie and I were in Alaska. She likes to travel, so I try to travel when she wants to travel. And so we've been whale watching, and we'd gone and found some grizzly bears and took pictures, and we saw eagles, and we'd flown over the glacier, and we're doing all this stuff. And walking down the street, I think we're in Skagway, walking down, and there was this kid on a poster. He was holding a starfish about the size of a large pizza. And she said, hey, we need to do that. I said, baby, they're not going to let us hold starfish. Well, yeah, they will. I said, no, they won't. They wouldn't be on the picture if they wouldn't let us do it. I said, I just don't think they're going to let us hold a star. Go in there and ask. I go and ask. Sure enough, you can hold a starfish in Alaska. I said, well, we can't do it because in order to do that, you have to learn to snorkel, and we don't know how to snorkel. She said, they'll teach us. I said, I don't want to learn to snorkel in Alaska. Number one, the water's cold. Number two, there are things that live in that water that I'm snack size. Well, guess what? I learned to snorkel in Alaska. So we go to this place, and they put you in a neoprene suit, head to toe, mask, boots. The thing is so tight, I busted my lip putting it on. I was trying to put it, I hit myself. I came out of the little tent wearing this blue and black suit, felt the urge to fight crime. It was really cool. They stuck this thing in my mouth and a mask over my face, and they put me in the cold Alaskan water. 98.6 body temperature. I walk on the ground, I breathe air. And all of a sudden, I'm in the cold water. The water gets in the suit. It insulates it. Your body heats it up, and you're not cold. You can breathe underwater because you got the snorkel, and the suit helps you float so you can swim. It's a survival suit. I'm a land walker, air breather, warm-bodied, and and I get put in this hostile environment, and I got this stuff to survive. A Roman soldier, when he walked outside in this area, didn't step outside in his blue jeans, his T-shirts, and his flip-flops. When he walked outside, he had to have something to survive. A breastplate, a helmet, a belt that carried his weapons, special shoes. Paul says if you're a spiritual creature and you're going to live in a physical world, in order to survive that, you got to have salvation and righteousness and truth and peace in the Bible. And it's a survival suit, not a warrior suit. Please listen. Don't misinterpret what I'm saying. The LGBTQ movement is not your enemy. The children who are confused about what they are, the transgender movement, not your enemy. The atheistic professor at the college is not your enemy. The atheist downtown who has an agenda is not your enemy. The drug addict living under the bridge is not your enemy. They are all victims of your enemy. And if I think my job as a Christian is to declare war on them, not only does my enemy have them, he has me too, because it violates God and people, people and people. Listen to this verse. Verse 11, put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle, our warfare is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against the rulers of darkness in this age, against the spiritual host of wickedness in heavenly places. Therefore, put on the armor of God. I'm not at war with anybody, and you're not at war with anybody. But if the devil can get us to declare war on the people we disagree with, then we violated God and people, people and people. But if I put on righteousness and truth and faith and peace and the sword of the Spirit, I can survive in a world where those people are there, and I've got the ability to survive, and therefore I can be on a rescue mission. And I can fulfill God's purpose, not just in my family, not just with my wife and my kids and my boss and my employees, but I can fulfill that with anybody who's out there who's a victim of the true evil in this world. God's plan for relationships is the unity of humanity, and not just the people who think like us and not just the people who look like us. It's the people who, just like us, need a Savior. That's our job. That's our mission. That's relationships according to the New Testament. Now, if you're not good at your relationships, and we could encourage you this morning, if you're not in a relationship with God, if you're not saved, if you're not a New Testament Christian, and we could talk to you about baptism or pray for you, we offer you what we call the invitation. We sing a song. It's to encourage you to come down and talk to our minister. And if there's some way we can help you, assist you, pray with you, pray for you, study with you, baptize you, we want you to be a part of God's plan to bring God and people together. And we give that invitation while we stand, while we sing.